Good morning, it's Elizabeth West, editorial director from the BTN Group here on BTN TV. And I've got joining me in this session, Glenn from FCM and Ben from Parexel. Thank you so much for being here, both of you. We are going to be talking about sustainability with these gents, and both of you have some new titles on sustainability. You've just moved to FCM not too long ago. And Ben, you just took a hold of the sustainability leadership at your company, Parexel. Tell me a little bit about that in terms of travel management, leading sustainability. How did that come about?
Yeah, it's an interesting new role,
Yeah.
definitely, to be in charge of travel and sustainability. I think the driving factor is for anybody who's in a non-manufacturing business, like professional services. The biggest emissions are in scope 3, and usually it's either purchase goods and services or business travel and commute. And that's why I think they looked at, I'm a perfect candidate to help their driving down the emissions.
Are you seeing more of that among travel managers actually clients of FCM with travel managers taking over sustainability?
I think it's definitely a trend, as Ben says, where if you're a company that business travel takes a huge percentage, over 50% in particular, then it often sort of seems to land there. Whether that's the right place or not, I think is very much down to the culture of the company and also the nature of the individuals.
Right.
But it is something I think, regardless of whether it's the right or the wrong decision strategically, it's a huge opportunity. Because if you are owning travel, then sustainability is going to be a very visible part of what you're tasked with in the years ahead. So really, take that opportunity, take a step first and use it to your advantage. I think if it's not happening, then you should really be looking to make it happen.
Right. And I'm going to stick with you, Glenn, for 1 second. There are quite a number of exhibitors at the show that have green solutions, carbon calculators. What are you most excited about in terms of solutions for sustainability coming into managed travel?
So one of the things, if not the thing that I'm the most excited about, it actually ties very much to the tagline I've been sort of trying to really use since stepping into this role. And that is sustainability is more than carbon. Now, the philosophy behind that is not as blunt as to say we have to stop calculating or we shouldn't calculate because it's difficult. Of course, we keep calculating. Calculations are tied to things like our science-based targets commitments. They're tied to our organizational accounting methods and a lot of other data practices that we have to take. But as far as really enabling and driving the behavioral change of travelers and the industry at large, that's going to happen with things that are not carbon specific. And that's something which I don't think we're really seeing the full potential yet. So we've seen some things like HRS Green Stay, for example, putting a lot more perspective on the accommodation side. We've seen a lot of talk about more detailed air calculations. We just launched the partnership with the Kappa Invest Sustainability Index very recently. That takes into account a lot more than the standard distance methodology of an air journey. And I think that's what's really exciting. As you start to get more data for sustainability practices for all categories that travelers can engage with, but also that you can build into your program from a procurement perspective, from a prioritization perspective. How do you pick and choose the right suppliers without deteriorating that calculation at the same time? They have to happen together. You need the accurate calculations, but you need more metrics for making the right decisions.
Okay.
And that's what really excites me.
Okay. I'm going to have you give the mic back to Ben. So how, Ben, are you at Parexel incorporating sustainability into your sourcing processes, into your traveler management?
First of all, it's not a choice anymore. So it's not a tick box exercise as in many companies. So one thing is definitely that during the RFPs, there are more questions, and it's not like, do you have, but show me certifications. Like also, if example, like solar panels for hotels, like there are more questions and details. And also, do you report to CDP? Are you committed to sustainable targets? So some more things. And so at the end, the supplier base you want to contract with is getting smaller. And even if they maybe have a good price, if their sustainable basic criteria are not met, they're not even invited.
Right.
And I think this will be the future. It will be a journey where we all have to work together, because in some areas there will be investments be necessary by suppliers. And so we need to wear the sourcing hat and the sustainability hat and find a way where we can both aim for the same goals. So in other words, just asking for the lowest price and the highest sustainability investments might not be the fairest approach.
Right. Thank you for saying that, the quiet part out loud, right? Because I think there are some perceptions out there that might be possible, and I'm not sure that that's realistic. How are you bringing sustainability to your travelers? How are you making them aware of the strategies that your company wants to put in place with the suppliers that will allow them to choose a greener pathway in their business travel?
It's a very good question. So I think the best approach is not to do this with a policy and the stick. You have to be green now.
Right.
No, that won't work. So on one hand, you've got the different personas in the company. You've got people who want to do this anyway, and they do this on their leisure, and so they do this in business already. And then you've got people who need to have it as seamless as now. And you have to give them new products, processes where it's not a hurdle. And then you've got these laggards where you need to convince them a little bit more. And I think it's an approach over time. So what we're doing is we're introducing what we call options best behavior, where we're just recommending stuff. Like take the train. If you can, go there in 4.5 hours, and please don't take the flight. But we're not like saying you can't use the flight, because there might be exceptions. And so we hope that people see really that the sustainable options are good or better, and they choose them because they think it's the right thing to do.
I want to pass the mic back to Glenn for 1 second. In the news specifically recently, there's been a lot about a backlash against airlines, particularly for greenwashing. And I know you have been working with a lot of airline data, and the report you mentioned, that your collaboration with Kappa and Invest. Tell me a little bit about your thoughts on that type of backlash, and is it productive, and how can we guard against greenwashing? It's a lot. It's a big question. It is a big question for the top of the morning, but I think it's important.
It's incredibly important, and I think it's great that you're asking it, and I'm definitely more than happy to respond to it. I'll caveat and just say perhaps a little bit more on the personal side than specifically as an FCM response.
Yes,
there's a lot of layers in there. But ultimately, and this is something I think just as an industry, we have to move forward and be honest, be transparent, and accept it. We're going to see more of this, and it's probably going to get worse. Because quite frankly, the statements that a lot of airlines make, they're not true. If you look at a lot of the messaging, fly carbon neutral, fly green, we can't do that today. We can't even do that in 10 years. Even if we produce all the SAF, sustainable aviation fuel, that we think is possible to produce based on what we see today, additional investments, we're still looking at way less than 10% in comparison to what's being consumed for the entire industry as far as fuel goes. So again, to say we're sustainable when flying, that's a really bad message, and we're putting so much pressure on the environment and meeting 1.5 degree targets that there's going to be more and more restrictions on what you can say there. France have already put in place legislation that it is no longer legal to use those terms in marketing. So you cannot put up a flyer or a billboard in France that says a product is carbon neutral. Even if you have offsets or anything else behind the scenes, it's illegal to do it. And we're going to see more of it. So I think it's very, very risky. And it's a good thing that we're asking for better transparency. Honestly, I think it's a huge opportunity. Airlines are doing things. They are investing in newer, more sustainable fleets. They are investing in better sourcing practices for onboard food and beverage. They are using, in some cases, more than 0.1% of sustainable aviation fuel across their entire footprint. The report that we now have access to with Kappa and Invest shows that, and it proves that with data. So it's not that airlines aren't doing sustainable things. It's just that they're communicating them in a way that, quite frankly, is disingenuous. And we need to be very, very careful as an industry. This is probably our last chance to really get people to believe us. We've had plenty of evidence in the last 5, 10 plus years. People don't buy offsets. So let's not make sustainable aviation fuel the next offset. Let's be honest. So we get travelers and corporate buyers like Ben to engage with it in the way that we know we can. We're a huge opportunity to drive this forward. The corporate travel side is probably the biggest opportunity to make travel sustainable if we do it right.
I agree with that. And I'm going to give it back to Ben for a minute. And Ben, I'm not going to ask you specifically about greenwashing, but I do think that the backlash and the messaging has to improve, because it will turn people off of sustainability who might really be able to impact the travel environment, right? Might be able to really, and those are people like Ben and people in our industry who have a lot of buying power, who could have a big impact on how this industry is transformed. And that's what I want to talk to you about, Ben. Travel managers bring a lot to the table in terms of their ability to push suppliers and stimulate the market to go greener and to make change. Can you tell me a little bit about that and sort of the power of a collective travel management community coming and saying we need to be greener?
It's a very good question, and it's a topic which is not easy. But I think, as you pointed out, sustainable aviation fuel is the so far only solution out of this. But this needs more than 10 years to build up even like the production which is visible, not the 1% now.
Right.
And so, but the thing is, the investments into building up the plants need to happen now. And so the question is, I think, to answer your question, is in a way, we need to work with the airlines together. How do we get the funding for these investments in the right size to be in 10 years ready to consume enough sustainable aviation fuel? And so I think this is where either some companies are like colleagues of mine, big companies who maybe have gigantic profit margins, they can afford this. And it's great what they're doing. Don't get me wrong. It's really good, but not everybody can copy this. And so on the other side, I think we need to work with the airlines to say, maybe, can we talk about a committed investment and then talk about your price? Mm-hmm. And I think this is the solution out there. On the other side, like the EU, for example, if you buy sustainable aviation fuel now, you get a certificate. If you would now invest into sustainable aviation fuel plants, which will produce in 10 years, you get nothing to claim. So the incentives by the governments are set, in my view, fully wrong.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's not helping.
Yeah. Opens another box for us to talk about, and unfortunately we don't have time to do that this morning, but those are the types of conversations that need to be happening here in forums like the Business Travel Show. So I hope that you'll have those conversations, bring those to the table while you're at the show, and that's how we find solutions, right? So keep questioning, keep pushing for change. So thank you so much for watching BTN TV here at the Business Travel Show Europe. And thank you both Ben and Glenn for joining me this morning. It's been a pleasure.